Good evening to all, and welcome to my podcast, Tea with Michelle. My name is Michelle Perez, and today we will be talking about emotional influences on learning. But first, we need to decipher what emotions really are. According to Gluck, Mercado, and Myers, who have a textbook all about learning and behavior, emotion is a cluster of three distinct but interrelated set of phenomena, which includes physiological responses, overt behaviors, and conscious feelings that are all produced in a response to an affecting situation. Now, physiological responses include anything that may change in bodily functions. Overt behaviors are basically everything we can see. So that would include facial expressions, posture, and etc. And lastly, conscious feelings would include everything you feel inside. So if you feel happy, if you feel sad, and so on. All of these factors of emotions have strong influences on how we learn and remember. The connection between emotions and remembrance is as follows. We remember more events that occurred in our lives if they are intense in emotion. So if the event spikes our emotions, we're most likely to remember these times more vividly than others. An example of this would be my high school graduation. I had worked my whole life to get to that day, and I remember feeling so excited, satisfied, and proud, and ready for the next chapter of my life. Because my emotions were heightened, I'm able to recall these events years after they occurred. I still remember that day. And the emotions I felt caused a great impact in me on that day, and that's why this is something I would never forget. Now, emotions have a role on encoding and retrieving memories as well. The more emotionally intense a situation is, the more likely those memories will be encoded into your brain. For example, if you watch an action movie, you're more likely to remember the action part or the scene with the most fighting or something that excites you during the movie. The peak scene or even the tragic ending are also going to be the parts encoded into your memory because those were the scenes that heightened your emotions and dug at your core a little more. Hey, that rhymes. Emotions also affect how memories are recalled. If you come into a situation where you are put in a similar environment as a certain event in your life, chances are the same feelings will trigger those memories, good or bad. So basically, it is easier to remember things or events in your life that match the moods or emotional states you may be in. This brings us to the topic of observational learning. This is a way of learning by, and it's even in the title, by observing. Observational learning means we are learning by watching our surroundings. We retain what we see, and our behaviors and actions that come later are based upon what we saw and how we would learn from them. We use those learned behaviors to base our own actions off of. Psychologists also say that copying is a part of observational learning. We copy the behaviors we learn. Now, emotions tie in here because if we feel satisfied or enjoy a certain behavior that was copied, chances are we'll keep copying and even take the behavior and make it our own. This is shown by the studies of psychologist Albert Bandura. In the 1960s, he conducted an experiment. He had a group of young children watch adults behave in a room with a blow-up doll. The adults were told to beat up the doll and have the kids watch. The goal was to see if these kids would copy the behavior and beat the doll up themselves, essentially. The results concluded that after watching the adults engage in aggressive behaviors against the doll, they did the same when they were put in the same room alone. This shows that behaviors and reactions definitely are copied. The emotions that were observed as the adults beat up these dolls were observed and, according to studies, were sponged up, I guess you can say, by the children watching. And when the little ones were put into the same room, they copied and expressed the same rage and the same anger that was seen by the adults. So, in conclusion, observational learning and emotions are tied together in the sense that individuals watch, retain, and copy the actions and emotions that they see. Even if there's reinforcement involved, well, especially if there's reinforcement involved, that's the whole social/observational learning theory. If the behaviors that are observed are rewarded in the end, then of course the individual will mock and copy the same behaviors to receive the same reward. Emotions and observational learning are connected because, as touched on in the beginning of this podcast, the more emotions that are observed and expressed, the more learning is done. This is Michelle Perez, and you've been listening to Tea with Michelle. Have a good night.